Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I know we're a bit fewer than the previous days, but as you know, only the best are staying till the end. So I hope you had a nice lunch and enjoyed the food over there here. But please bear in mind that hundreds of people have been working on the meal that you've been eaten today, from farmers, caterers, distributors. It is indeed quite a complex supply chain that we know on the food industry, and that is the topic that will be discussed today. So, is this food chain broken, and why is it though? So I'm really pleased to pass the mic over to Camille. Camille, yeah. We will introduce us to our speakers today, and please, row of applause for everyone on the stage today. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Camille Kribic, and I'm partner and co-founder of Utopia. We are a B Corp certified investment fund dedicated to emerging consumer brands. So we invest in any kind of consumer categories: beauty, fashion, fitness, and so on. But of course, food is one of them. So as we tend to focus on the last link of the value chain, we know that a profound change of the global food and agriculture system is needed if we really want to nourish the 700 million people who are hungry today and the 2 billion people that the world will have by 2025, 2 additional billion people. So increasing agricultural productivity and sustainable food production are crucial to help feeding the world while dealing with our environmental constraints. And I'm convinced that we, as investors and financial players, have a major role to play in that transition. So that's why I'm really happy to be here today for this panel with speakers that I guess are sharing this opinion. And without further speech, I will let my speakers introduce themselves. So Laura, if you want to start with, or I don't know who has the mic.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Laura Alberga. I work at Rabo Investment, which is a captive investment arm of Rabobank. We invest worldwide in food and agri funds, and we also do co-investments with our fund partners. And additionally, we also have 3 other teams, 2 VC teams, 1 fintech related to the bank, 1 food agri-tech team, and a PE team active in the Netherlands, also dedicated to food and agri.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Allen Jones. I am a partner in the firm that advises the Kibas Food Funds. We currently have $900 million approximately that we've raised to invest in food and ag.
Hi, I'm Maxime Mandoni. I'm the CEO of Unigrain. Unigrain is a special investor in the world of investment because we are owned by French farmers, grain farmers, and we invest only with our equity. We're not raising money on the market, and we invest tickets around 25, 30 million in agroalimentary and agriculture in France, but also in Europe. We have subsidiaries in Milan and soon now also in Madrid.
I'm Thomas Biarciniaco. I'm the CEO of Capagro. Capagro is a venture fund specialized in agri-food tech. We invest mostly in Europe. We have 12 investments under Fund 1. We are raising our Fund 2. We've launched the fund, if you have not seen the press release, recently last week with our first investment in personalized nutrition. And we have two missions. Our mission is to bring innovation to the agri-food sector, to transition the agriculture to a sustainable agriculture. But also, and that might be a topic that we might want to discuss, is also make nutrition more healthier. So bringing health to human. So I'm very happy to share those thoughts with you today.
Thank you. So to start this panel, I wanted to say that the food industry as a whole is facing many challenges, and maybe more than any other ones, dealing with social, environmental, and political issues. So I thought it was important to give you some context so we all understand what we're dealing with, and maybe starting with the environmental issue. So just to give you one figure, but it is one out of many. So the food chain and the food system accounts for a third of our global greenhouse gas emissions, and half of it comes from livestock. So it's just one example, but maybe Tom, you can elaborate a bit about this first issue.
I'm not going to do any bashing about the agriculture or the food industry, but certainly when you look at the numbers and the impact of the industry on the environment, you're right to point out that it has a big impact on the greenhouse gas emission coming from livestock, but also coming from the use of fertilizers. It has a big impact also, if you want to name the impact on water, whether it's water degradation, surface water or groundwater, and or water scarcity, but also those. What is interesting when you look at that impact on the environment? There's been we've seen farmers and policymakers taking some steps, and when you look at the numbers, you've seen the numbers of, for example, nitrogen balance going down during the period 2000-2009. If you look at the OCDE figures, which seem to suggest that there was a nice trend. But the reality today, when you look at the 2009 to 2019 numbers, despite the fact that farmers have done a great job trying to reduce inputs, the trends has been going up again. And the annual increase, if you look at the OECD figures, is that there's a 1 to 2% increase per unit of land, use of fertilizers, as 0.5% of increase in the energy usage per unit of land during that period. So even though you have great efforts from policymakers, from farmers, it's not enough. And we believe that there is one way to deal with that. It's increase the usage of technology, innovation, and this is why we are here.
And we're going to speak about that later, because we also know that we need to keep at least the same productivity and even increase it, while having in our country at least less and less people to do that. So maybe Maxime, you want to
Yes.
say a word about it?
Yes, perhaps I can give an example in France where about 50% of the farmers are going to retire until 10 years. So it's something we saw in France, but it's quite the same in other cities, in other countries, where people are going to live in the cities and they're not going to live anymore in farms. That means that the models of farm, they are moving, they are changing a lot, they are growing, they need investments, they need to develop, and there is a real link to create between, in fact, agroalimentary and agriculture, because the raw material could be in the, 10 years, 20 years, something very special. So everybody needs to take care of that and to work on the, I would say, self-autosufficiency in terms of raw material and development.
And this is where maybe we have a people, if I could say, issue, because we are facing a double problem. So farmers have more and more constraints and pressure to adjust and to change their methods, but they do not always have the financial resources to do so. And so sometimes they protest. And Laura, when we prepared the panel, you mentioned some recent protests in the Netherlands about it. So maybe you can tell us more about it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so in the Netherlands, we have huge debate around nitrogen emissions. So in the summer, the government decided that we need to really reduce our nitrogen emissions, especially around the Natura 2000 areas, so the nature areas, because they're Indeed, like you also mentioned, Thomas, so the manure of the cows and also fertilizers really degrades the soil and decreases biodiversity in these areas. So the government decided that we need to cut those emissions very quickly, and that resulted in a lot of changes for the farmers. So a lot of farmers need to adjust their business models severely, and also even stop the farms, which is obviously a very abrupt change in their business model. So it resulted in protests on the highway in the Netherlands, and a huge debate going on. And also for Rabobank as a financer of all these farmers, we're actively involved or also very interested in the outcome of the debate.
And then I think we have the consumer pressure. So of course it's something at Utopia we are very aware of, because consumers want to have better food, healthier food, and have higher and higher expectations towards production. And maybe Jeremy, you want to say a word about it?
Well, something you said in your introduction, Camille, where you said that there are 700 million people who are starving, which is appalling. But it's also terrible in my mind that there are 650 million obese people in the world. And that, I think, is also something that needs to be addressed, because that is suggesting that what people are eating is the wrong type of foods. But I'd like to sound a note of optimism, because it does strike me that as a result of COP26, the issues that we're talking about and the emissions point that you made, that 1/3 of which come from farming, I think now are at last front of mind in the big asset managers and providers of capital. And as a consequence of that, I think we've got a situation where we're getting towards a positive perfect storm, where we've got consumers becoming more and more aware of their needs, and we've got the asset management industry, which is now holding to account all companies. What is your plan? What is your path to net zero, over what period, etc.? And I think, quite frankly, now all companies have to take this seriously, because frankly, if they don't, they will be denied capital, whether it be equity capital, private capital like we supply, or indeed bank finance. So I think we've got this really purple patch coming, where we've got growing consumer awareness on the health side. What am I eating? What's been put on these crops? What's been injected in into these animals? And we've also got the asset management industry providing capital, also now focused on it. So I'm actually very excited about the next 5 years.
So, and we are too, I think, and that's where I wanted to go and bring some hopes. So I had a last point about the geopolitical context, but I don't want to break the mood, and I will jump to the hopes and the solution. And because each of you, in a way, if you're here, it's because you want to address those changes. So maybe starting with the innovation, because as Tom, you said, financing the new tools and finding the new solutions is a way to break that circle. So what are you looking at? Where do you see the most promising opportunities that can help fix, if you can say, this broken chain?
So I'd like to classify, like, we have shorter-term solutions and then we have longer-term solutions. Not all those technologies are ready to be deployed. But you have some technologies today, and I'm going to give you kind of 3 examples of technologies today that we think can make a difference. One is precision ag, and I'm taking reference to our own portfolio, where we see the direct results of product technologies that we see with those companies. So precision ag with precision spraying, so the ability to reduce the amount of input on fields by really spraying where it's needed the most. So that's one area. Ag robotics is another area. We have a company doing it's an autonomous robot that does mechanical weeding. So when you think about mechanical weeding, it means that no use of herbicides. It's the well-being of farmer also, instead of going in the field themselves and do it manually. And when you think about mechanical weeding with an autonomous robot, you're thinking about electricity. So the robot goes actually on the field, not using diesel engines like you would with a traditional tractor. So you have the benefit of reducing the carbon footprint of weeding. The last technology that I think is interesting today is controlled environment agriculture. I'm not talking about vertical farming, just to make it clear. We have other technologies like in controlled environment, horizontal, but very, very productive. So for example, when you grow a salad, I don't know if you know how many liters you need to grow a salad in the field, but it's about 60 liters, 15 gallons. With that technology, you can reduce to 2 liters by using the technology. No pesticides, no herbicides, because you're in controlled environment. So those technologies that have been deployed, and we are currently deploying in Kuwait, in Germany, in France, in Switzerland, those are technologies that are working and that have a benefit. And longer term, you can think about bio-input. Fertilizers, like you mentioned, is a big responsible of greenhouse gas emission, and bio-inputs have the ability to reduce that consumption significantly. Bioprotection is probably closer to us in terms of availability. It doesn't have to demonstrate the efficacy. It's easier, so I think it's going to come first. Seed breeding, whether it's like traditional methods or through gene editing, is probably one area where we're going to see some resistance to some diseases and to increase the yield on some crops. And I would say longer term carbon capture and all the carbon sequestration that can be using land as a way to capture carbon is certainly an area where we see some potential.
And what about you, Jeremy? Are there any other areas that you're looking at?
So picking up on what Thomas said about precision ag, there's this trend now away from treating all of the plants in your field and all of the animals in your field the same. So, for example, Google Street View are using that camera technology now to look at plants on an individual basis, and then if they're a weed, hoik them out, or if they're sick, give them some more fertilizer. So I think that's a trend. Similarly, farmers have tended to inject all their cows with antibiotics, and there are now all sorts of technologies. We're invested in a company that puts collars on cows and basically alerts the farmer to when the cow is sick. After about 10 days, it recognizes the biorhythms in the cow and then can predict effectively. Mastitis is the most important things in dairy herds. So it's this move to treat plants and animals as individuals. I think the other thing is we believe that the habit of eating meat is going to continue for some time, despite the fact, as Camille points out, that effectively a sixth of GHG emissions come from livestock. So we're interested in investing in companies that grow meat but without growing animals. So we've invested in a number of laboratory-grown meat and fat, which has a much better carbon footprint and of course also does not have the GHG emissions. And then I think the other area that we think is very interesting is using pheromones to control insects. Regulators are pushing more and more to ban chemicals, and we are invested in a French company which is called M2I, which uses synthetically produced pheromones to basically confuse the males of the species, that the females are out and the males fly around, and then, like many insects, they don't last very long. They basically die exhausted, and that's a very interesting way of basically controlling and replacing insecticides. So those are three areas that we think are interesting to invest in at the moment.
And hearing you, I say, okay, so we can have these solutions and this innovation, and now the problem is how to be sure that farmers can have access to it, and how to help the current structure to adapt and to adjust. And maybe that's where you, Maxime, with Unigrain, or you, Laura, can help. So how do you do to make sure that those innovations can go through the farmers?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So I think at Rabobank, since we're a financer of many of these, for example, farmers and large part of the chain, there's a lot of initiatives going on. One example is the Carbon Bank, where we help. We started with milk cow farmers, where we help them indeed reduce emissions. We could help farmers with agroforestry, also with carbon sequestration, like you mentioned. Help them increase the amount of carbon credits produced, or at least reduce emissions, and then also help them make a profitable side stream of it. So that's one way. We also have a project Acorn, where we help smallholder farmers also with regenerative agriculture, and we sell all the credits that are generated on a market where other players in the supply chain are able to use those credits to further improve the supply chain. So I think from an LP and a financing perspective, that's steps that we're taking.
Yes, in the same way, we create something that we call the added value for our portfolio, and the idea of the added value is how to help them to reach the target in carbon, for example, how to help them to reach new technologies and new things in the way to improve all the ESG things.
Your institutions have been supporting this industry for years, decades, century, even for you. So I guess you've seen many changes. So for instance, how did your investment strategy evolve? So maybe Maxime, to start with you, with Unigrain.
Strategy is moving because now we are regarding more all the ESG key figures, for example. Of course, but also, as I said before, all the value we can bring to the portfolio. The idea today is we have four ways to invest. First way is traditional one is to invest in a company for build something or a project or something like that. The second one, it's generally in the mid and small cap to invest around the transmission, about what is going to happen if they have families or something like that. The third one is to support transition, how we can help them to bring new solution to develop the transition. We talk about carbon, we talk about supply chain, we talk about industry 4.0, etc., etc. And the last one, it's really to develop the next stages about the agroalimentary and around all the innovation points or all what we can do with them to be on the right transition.
And Laura, investing in different countries, does your strategy differ from one area to another? And are we at the same level everywhere?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience, but I think I do see a difference. We invest a lot in Europe and in North America, and I think there's a lot of regulatory pressure in Europe, which makes funds and also LPs more prone on ESG issues. So an example is we did a co-investment in a company active in avocado oil, which is actually made from a waste product. So you could say, okay, it's a waste product, so that's inherently already sustainable. But we also had a lot of questions around water usage in avocado, and for example, this comes from Mexico, so you also have social issues in that supply chain. And I think as a European LP, we're a bit stricter there than perhaps our North American counterparts. Don't want to. I'm not assuming that US is not investing responsibly ever, but I think there's differences between Europe and US at the moment.
And this question of regulation, I know, Jeremy, it's something you speak a lot about it. To what extent does it impact either your investment strategy or your portfolio companies?
Well, let me give you an example. We have a berry business where we grow strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries for their antioxidant properties. And that operates in the UK and in Portugal. And the head grower there 2 years ago had 12 chemicals that he could put on our raspberry canes when they were attacked by aphids. Regulation has reduced that to 1. It's a product called Calypso, and to quote him, he said, it's not much good. So that is what regulation is doing. Now, immediately in the fields, we've had some real problems with aphids, but out of that, we've reassessed our strategy. Previously, dealing with all insect pests was a sort of scorched earth policy, where you sprayed them multiple times. Bananas arriving in this country have been sprayed on average 8 times. And that's the strategy to control insects. So what we've done in Portugal is we've employed a lady who, using some inspiration from Victorian apple growers in the UK, has now taught us that around our polytunnels we have bushes that allow the population of what we call beneficial insects to build up. So there are aphids on these bushes and the beneficials are built up. And then when the strawberry canes go into the polytunnels, the beneficials move from the bushes outside the polytunnels into the polytunnels. And so she's changed our philosophy to one of tolerance. So we now tolerate a small number of aphids on our raspberry canes, but when we're walking through the polytunnels, she's saying, look, there are the aphids, but there are the beneficials, things like ladybirds and lacewings and parasitic wasps, which eat aphids. And so it's a change in philosophy from the scorched earth, blast the insects with all sorts of chemicals, to one of tolerating but creating a balance between the beneficials and the insect that you're trying to control.
And you say in the end it was more efficient, right?
It's much more efficient. Initially, it cost us money. A ladybird costs about 50 euro cents on Amazon, so they're expensive things to buy. So for the first 2 years, we didn't save any money, but we now actually think we've got a better product, we will save money, and it's much more sustainable as well in terms of our approach. So it's a triple win.
And Tom, you mentioned that you just raised a new fund with Capagro and are still raising. Did you feel any pressure and any additional pressure from the LPs to increase your impact and your ESG approach through your investments?
I think it's I thought about that question, and it has not changed the way we do things. Like our mission remains the same. I think what has changed with the questions that we got from our current LPs and LPs that we are in discussions, or potential LPs that we are in discussion with, is what is the process that you're using? What are the metrics that you're using? So we needed to formalize our process and come up with something that give comfort to the potential investors or the LPs that we were doing what we were supposed to do, and like we said we would be doing. So this is really what was different. What in terms of our action, so we select those companies that we think have a beneficial impact, and we have KPIs and we measure, and we have also our ESG criteria that we use, but we have like 2 separate methods for impact and for ESGs, which is probably something that other funds obviously do. But one important thing is also we recognize that to change the agri-food chain and to result in better agriculture and healthier nutrition, it's not just bringing startups. Those startups alone will not change the world. It's how we make those legacy business adopt the technologies, the services, the products that those startups come up with. And for us, it's the additional benefit also of making those exits and giving back the money to our investors so that we can launch Fund 3. So we like to create those bridges between corporates that are the legacy businesses, the farmers, and the innovation from the startups.
It's a virtuous circle. Something I really liked when we prepared this panel, and as I hear you today, is that we are and you are all very optimistic. And so your first reaction was food chain is not broken, actually. So, but food chain is very resilient. So maybe can you give us an example, each of you, either from one portfolio company or one initiative that you've seen that can really show that there is hope and change is on its way. I don't know who wants to start, but
I can start. Yeah, so I think I already mentioned the avocado oil business, which makes oil from a waste product. I think in general, so we're a fund investor. I think in general we're just very happy with our fund partners investing in new innovations and new technologies. So I think also coming to what you mentioned earlier, Jeremy, and also Thomas, I think from an LP's perspective, it's just very important to also look at the ESG metrics and not only look at track record and net return that's being made. I think that's key going forward to also help accelerate the transition here.
I think the example I'll give is we grow almonds in Australia. They're thirsty from a water perspective, and we've introduced a technology there which basically puts a collar around certain of the trees, which can, when the water goes up from the roots to the leaves via the xylem, and when those xylem are not full of water, the diameter of the tree actually slightly shrinks. And by having sensors attached, the orchard manager now doesn't have to go and inspect his trees. He just opens his smartphone or his tablet, and he can see which of the blocks within the orchards needs water. And so that can all be done effectively, what the combination of the yield increase and the reduction in water has resulted in that business increasing its crop per drop, which is one of our KPIs, by 36%. So I think that's an example of being able to utilize a resource like water more efficiently.
I think that I'm very happy to hear what you say before and what you say also, because the countries like USA, like China, they went out the Accord de Paris, and now today I think that one of the only way to develop all the ESG that we talked before, it's finance, because finance in Europe is very involved on all the ESG system, innovation, etc. So it's not really a technical solution, but I think that finance can help a lot all these problems.
I think adoption by farmers is something that we've seen. Adoption of new technology, I mean, is something that we've seen recently. And when we look at some of the numbers of one of our the agrobotic company, Nayo Technologies, for example, have been doubling the revenue over the past 2 years, and it's going to be doubling the revenue this year. And for us, adoption is key. And the fact that they've been doubling revenue means that they are selling more and more robots, that farmers are not just the early adopters, the one that are buying the robots, but it's become more of a standard practice for certain cultures, crops. And you would say, but why are they acting now? Why are they acting like 2 years ago or 3 years ago? But I think reliability has been key, so they've increased significantly the reliability of the robot, so it works. And the second thing is you need distributors that understand the product, and you need to train people. And now they've trained the people. Distributors know the product; they can sell. And the great thing is farmers are adopting the product. So for us, it's very attractive, very appealing, and great for the future.
Thank you. I really have the impression that if we bring awareness, innovation, talents, and financial resources, so maybe together we'll be able to fix this broken or resilient food chain. We have time for some questions. So the floor is yours. Yeah.
Do small farms or medium-sized farms have a future in the food chain, or is it all about economies of scale?
I read a very interesting book in January, which is called Toxic Legacy, and it's the story of glyphosate and the Monsanto product. And you may have seen the film Deep Waters, which is about DuPont's and Tefal. But I think Toxic Legacy and what glyphosate's done is equally troubling. So Monsanto developed glyphosate, and then they developed glyphosate-resistant wheat, corn, barley, etc. And that meant that the skills in big ag, you didn't have to have any skills, basically, because you could plant any crop, you could spray it with glyphosate. Glyphosate killed everything else. The glyphosate-resistant wheat came through. And so big ag has actually become rather de-skilled. And so we actually think that small, not tiny ag, but small ag will have something of a renaissance, because one of the other trends is consumers have woken up to the lack of biodiversity and the reduction in many, many benefits of biodiversity, and the whole idea of trying to bring diversity back into farming actually doesn't suit big ag either, because you need things like hedgerows and areas around fields and things. So I don't think it's going to turn on a penny, but I am optimistic about smaller farms, because I think they bring some of the things that we need to improve farming and farming techniques in the future.
How do you raise awareness into governments or GPs, larger investors, on positioning this asset class as a key factor for them to invest, as opposed to real estate infrastructure or other asset classes that are well established, but it seems to be a lot of capital inputs into the industry. So what's your strategy in terms of pitching your funds, your VC companies?
Fundraising. Fundraising is really like today one way to reach all the family offices, corporates, and we want corporates to be part of that transition, like I said before, and so philanthropic money, public money, and private money. So we do that every day. And this is a way to promote, basically, beyond Capago. I mean, this is really to promote the transition, the innovation for transitioning agriculture and for better health through better nutrition.
So does that answer your question, or was it really about?
It's more like, how do you normally make people understand, governments and large GPs, that food security is a major industry that they have to invest in, as opposed to other. If you look at the charts of like injection of private equity money, it's mainly green energy, but not food security. And I think food security and water consumption and recycling is way more important than other established markets. So do you do webinars? What's your strategy in order to get your word out there and make sure that it's a stick on their investment portfolios, as opposed to other asset classes that are over injected with capital?
Yeah, so we don't raise funds. We invest from our balance sheet. But I think I think indeed everything you mentioned we do. So that we have a research department writing about it. I think there's, especially here in Europe, there is a lot of awareness. There are a lot of new fund initiatives in agri and regenerative agri, also because it accounts for 20 to 30% of carbon emissions. And for the rest, it's fundraising.
It is an interesting area, because food, and particularly small-scale farming, tends to receive quite a significant amount of government money directly. The Common Agricultural Policy, I don't know the size of it, I'm ashamed to say, but it's absolutely massive. So I think it is a very important area, because government can direct that capital directly. And I live in the UK, and we've withdrawn from the Common Agricultural Policy, and it's going to be very interesting how our government redirects that money. And already they're saying that it's not going to be based on acreage anymore, and farmers in the UK are going to have to illustrate public good in order to continue to receive government money. Now, the problem that the UK government is facing is that they've got all of the headlines, but the farmers are screaming, because they're saying, we want to understand the detail. We need to understand how we apply for these new subsidies. So it's not, the UK farming industry is not at all happy at the moment. And then you add on, obviously, what the Ukraine situation has done to pricing, and there's a lot of shouting. But I do think your point about government in farming, because it does provide so many subsidies, can direct money to what it wants to achieve.
You know, if you think about funds or pension funds, they're not directly investing in these companies or like early stage opportunities. I'm sorry. So, because I work with government, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, family office, institutional, everything, and we see that most of the time, companies like yourself, VC funds, you will never get pension money. I mean, not get me wrong, maybe you can have the opportunity, but I see it all the time that they will never invest in first-time funds, for example. And those first-time funds, for example, have a lot of access to deal flow that belongs to VCs, and they have great potential to reach out to smaller SMEs and stuff like that. So my sort of objective is that, okay, how do we raise awareness on governmental money coming to VCs, for example, that could potentially break that cycle into, we have to invest portion of that capital of our portfolio allocation into VCs, for example. So it's something that I really think about a lot, because small SMEs could have a lot of potential and impact into our society, and we have to find ways to make sure that our message is sent to big institutions. Yeah. So I was curious to understand what methodologies do you use to get in front of those large investors?
So interestingly, when you look at our Fund 1, we had the French Development Bank being part of our fund. So you have institutions that are actively deploying money, like public institution deploying money into that field, recognizing the need for innovation. They are coming into Fund 2, so it's a good sign. And we have there's also European institutions like the FEE, the French, EIF, yeah. Thank you. Looking also at deploying funds into that area. So we are actively having discussions with them. So there's really like they want to invest and deploy. And you're right to say that institutional investors traditionally they don't look at Fund 1 or Fund 2. They look at Fund 3 and our aim is really to build a track record, and this is true for everybody. Like build our track record so that institutional investors from traditional institutional investors will come to our fund. It's going to be Fund 3 maybe, but they will come. And our objective now is to make sure that we bring those exits, like we grow our companies, we bring those exits, and we deliver a return to our investors. And I think it's true for Capago, but it's true for every fund in that industry. And you have, like any industry, you have the early adopters, and the family offices, the development banks, some corporates. I would like to mention, if you look at corporates that have invested into our fund, like Avril Group, LSDH, Bell, the Bell Group, those corporates and the co-ops also. The farmers are behind us, like Terena, for example, invested, Euralis invested. So it's very encouraging to see, corporates, development banks, family offices, and the next step, you're right, it's going to be institutional investors, but we have to deliver.
We need to close up. Thank you very much, and thank you for the four of you.
Thank you.